Hi everyone, Mr. G here. Let's talk about variables. So over here, I'm going to make sure variables is open and I'm going to click on variables markdown. And then I'm going to check out the preview here. So all the code samples in here again are in variables.py. If you ever want to check that out, play around with it yourself, change some values. So first of all, automatic typing. We mentioned this in the type system, where if we use an equal sign to declare a variable, to assign a value to it, and when Python sees the equal sign, it looks at the value and determines what type the variable needs to be. So it sees the number 5, a is an integer. 12.2, b is a float. True sees a boolean. Quotes with text, d is a string. So it uses that to systematically determine what the variable should be. Now, when we do an operation with a variable, we're not necessarily changing its value. So performing an operation doesn't necessarily change its value. So these examples here, a plus b and a plus 5, don't actually change the value of a and b. So 5 plus 12.2 is 17.2, 5 plus 5 is 10, and a is still 5 and b is still 12.2 even though we did these operations. So that's actually really useful because we don't always want to change values when we do an operation, especially when it's a value we might need to reuse multiple times. So we have specific methods for modifying the variable's values with assignments. So the equal sign is assignment. So even if we already have an a, if we say a equals 7, it overwrites it. It says, oh, it was 5, but now it's 7. We can forget the 5. So it'll print a is now 7. We could also assign to a calculation, even a calculation using a variable. So we're going to set a to be the value of b plus 8. So it figures out what's going on the right side here. I note that it's 12.2 plus 8 will give us 20.2. And it also changes a to a float. It says 20.2 is a float, so a has to be a float to hold 20.2. Now, the coolest thing that most programming languages support, but is really useful, is that the assignment can self-reference. So you can make an assignment to a variable with an operation on that variable's old value. So here, this is an equation that would never make sense in math. A equals a minus 4. But in this context, it knows on the right side to take the current value of a, subtract 4, so it was 20.2, so we do 20.2 minus 4, and we turn it into 16.2. And then it saves that to a and overwrites it. So even though this looks really wrong, because it's a equals a minus 4, this subtracts 4 from the value and then saves it for us and produces that 16.2 output. Now, this is something we do frequently, and so we have a concept of compound assignments to do this more compactly and more easily. So when we look to modify a variable by doing an operation on its current value, we use a compound assignment. So we combine one of our operations with an equal sign to make a larger symbol with two pieces. So I give an example here, a plus equals 4. So this is the same thing as a equals a plus 4. So a plus equals 4 adds 4 to the value and then saves over it. So 16.2 plus 4 is now 20.2. This works with any of our basic operations. Minus equals subtracts the number, then saves it. Multiplication multiplies the value, then saves it. True division does the decimal division and saves it. Integer division does integer division and saves it. Modulo remainder finds the remainder when you divide by the number and saves it. And exponentiation, probably the rarest used of these, raises that number to a power and then saves it. In this case, it might look like it didn't do anything because we had a is 1 and then a is 1. But 1 raised to any power is still 1. So raising it to the third power shouldn't have changed the value. So that's a good sign that it didn't. Now, as a final note, compound assignment works on other types of variables. It's not just for numbers, though it is most commonly used with numbers. So here I have an example of a string. We talked about the concatenate operator being the plus sign for strings in the last section. So here we have a variable d, which we defined earlier as just string. And so we did plus equals another string. So it takes the original string, tacks on the new piece and saves that as the whole new string. So it took the word string, tacked on a little str, and then saved over it. And again, concatenate doesn't automatically add the space. If we wanted a space, we would have to do that ourselves. So again, if you want to play around with these more, these are really cool these operators have really cool potential. Go into the variables.py file and check out what it does and try and modify some values and predict the output yourself. From here, in the next video, we're going to start talking about the print statement. How can we use it to our advantage? What are some tools that it has available to us?